Long before the rise of cities, before written chronicles and mapped borders, people in the center of West Africa began shaping a world that would later astonish archaeologists. The Nok culture, named after the small Nigerian village where its remains were first uncovered, stands today as the earliest known Iron Age society south of the Sahara. Its story begins in the uplands of central Nigeria, a region of red soil, seasonal rivers, and wooded hills that offered both shelter and resources for early communities. Archaeological evidence shows that by around 1500 BCE, small farming groups had settled across this landscape. They cultivated millet and sorghum, kept cattle, and gathered iron-rich laterite from the ground without realizing the transformative technology it would soon yield. Over generations, these villagers learned to harness fire and airflow in clay furnaces, smelting ore at temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. What they achieved was extraordinary. They produced workable iron centuries before similar techniques spread through much of Europe or Asia. The mastery of iron reshaped every aspect of life. Tools for clearing land became sharper and more durable than stone or bronze. Hoes and sickles increased agricultural output, supporting larger populations. Spears and arrowheads allowed hunters to bring down game with precision and gave communities a means of defense. Iron was both a tool of survival and a symbol of status. Those who controlled its production held influence within the village hierarchy. Archaeologists have identified the remains of these furnaces across the Nok region, cylindrical clay structures, often half-buried in laterite, with evidence of intense heat on their inner walls. The arrangement of slag and tuyères, the clay pipes used to channel air, indicates deliberate engineering rather than trial and error. This was not accidental discovery. It was technological innovation supported by shared knowledge and specialized skill. While their furnaces forged metal, the Nok also turned clay into art. Scattered through Nigeria's Kaduna and Plateau states, fragments of terracotta figures have been recovered from farming fields, mining sites, and eroded streambeds. These sculptures, dated between 1000 BCE and 500 CE, reveal a society that valued representation and ritual. The faces are expressive, often with triangular eyes, elaborate hairstyles, and patterned scarification. Some figures show seated men and women, others animals such as elephants, monkeys, or snakes. The technical competence required to create such works was remarkable. Each sculpture was molded from fine clay mixed with laterite gravel to prevent cracking, then fired in an open kiln. Many were hollow, a method demanding control of heat and airflow to avoid collapse. Despite their fragility, hundreds have survived millennia underground, protected by the same iron-rich soil that once sustained their creators. Interpretations of Nok terracottas vary. Some researchers believe they served religious functions, perhaps representing ancestors or spiritual guardians placed in shrines or graves. Others propose they signified leadership or social rank, a visual language communicating authority in a world without writing. Whatever their purpose, the consistency of style across vast distances implies shared beliefs and communication between dispersed communities. The Nok heartland was never a single city or capital. Rather, it was a network of farming villages connected by exchange and kinship. Archaeological surveys reveal clusters of habitation sites, each with pottery traditions, iron furnaces, and sculpture fragments. The distribution suggests a population organized into small chiefdoms, cooperating in trade but maintaining local autonomy. Charcoal samples from smelting sites show continuous occupation for centuries, evidence of stability unusual for early Iron Age societies. Trade flowed along footpaths that linked the savanna to forest and river. From the north came salt and stone. From the south, oil-bearing nuts, wood, and possibly ivory. The Nok exchanged iron tools and ornaments, establishing routes that may later have evolved into the trading corridors used by the Hausa and other West African peoples. As their population grew, the Nok modified the landscape. They cleared woodland for fields, terraced slopes to control erosion, and dug storage pits for grain. Analysis of pollen and soil layers indicates cycles of cultivation and abandonment, signs of organized agriculture responding to seasonal rainfall. The environment provided abundance but demanded respect. Overuse of land would later contribute to their decline, yet during their height it sustained a thriving society of farmers, herders, and artisans. Though the Nok left no written record, their artifacts reveal a balanced world of labor, faith, and artistry. The rhythm of village life was likely marked by harvest rituals, initiation ceremonies, and gatherings where music, dance, and storytelling affirmed social bonds. Children learned by observing elders at the furnace or the potter's wheel. Each generation passed down both technique and tradition, ensuring continuity across centuries. By around 500 BCE, the Nok culture reached its zenith. Iron production intensified, and stylistic variations in terracotta art suggest regional workshops. The population expanded into the valleys surrounding the Jos Plateau, exploiting mineral resources and fertile soils. From these centers, Nok influence radiated outward. The spread of ironworking across West Africa may well have originated from this nucleus. Yet prosperity carried risk. The same forests that fed their furnaces were slowly depleted for charcoal. Agricultural pressure on the soil increased. Shifts in rainfall patterns could devastate harvests. Archaeological layers show alternating periods of occupation and abandonment, signs of migration or decline. By 500 CE, Nok material culture faded from the record. What followed remains uncertain. Whether they dispersed into neighboring groups or evolved into the ancestors of later Nigerian civilizations is still debated. Their disappearance left behind silence, but the earth preserved their memory. In 1928, miners searching for tin near the village of Nok unearthed a small clay head. It was the first rediscovery of a people whose name would later describe an entire era of African history. Over the decades, excavations expanded under archaeologists such as Bernard Fagg and Josephine Fagg. They cataloged hundreds of artifacts, mapping the distribution of sites and confirming the antiquity of the Nok civilization. Radiocarbon dating placed some pieces over 2.5 millennia old, long before the rise of classical Athens or imperial Rome. The significance of these findings was profound. They demonstrated that Sub-Saharan Africa possessed complex societies, with advanced technology and artistic expression, centuries before external influence. The Nok culture became a cornerstone for re-evaluating African prehistory, proving that innovation was indigenous and widespread. The Nok culture of Nigeria continued. The Nok people were not merely metalworkers and artists. They were also skilled farmers and animal herders, shaping their environment in ways that supported long-term settlement. Archaeological surveys indicate that they cultivated a variety of crops suited to the savanna and woodland margins, including millet, sorghum, yams, and oil-bearing nuts. These crops provided stable nutrition, while their knowledge of seasonal cycles allowed them to anticipate droughts and floods. Evidence of storage pits suggests that they preserved surplus harvests, enabling trade and ensuring survival during lean periods. Herding supplemented agriculture. Cattle, goats, and sheep were integral to Nok society. Livestock provided not only food and milk, but also material for leather, bone tools, and ritual items. Cattle in particular held symbolic importance. Some terracotta figures display exaggerated bovine features, indicating the animal's role in ceremonies or status representation. The integration of farming and herding illustrates a sophisticated understanding of ecology and resource management, with each component reinforcing the other. Settlement patterns reflect social organization and communal planning. Villages were strategically located near iron ore deposits, fertile land, and water sources. Excavations show evidence of circular or rectangular compounds, sometimes with multiple hearths and storage areas, suggesting extended families or clans lived together. The arrangement of homes and communal spaces implies social hierarchy, with elders or leaders likely directing production, conflict resolution, and ritual practices. The presence of ceremonial artifacts in some areas indicates the coexistence of practical and spiritual life within the same settlement framework. Trade was crucial to Nok society. While iron tools and terracotta figurines were produced locally, there is evidence that they exchanged goods with distant communities. Obsidian, shells, and possibly salt reached Nok villages, while iron and crafted pottery may have traveled south toward forested regions and north into the savanna. These networks facilitated not only material exchange but also the flow of ideas, technological innovations, and cultural practices. Nok ironworking likely influenced later metallurgical traditions in West Africa, laying the foundation for the rise of kingdoms such as the Yoruba, Benin, and Hausa states. The technological expertise of the Nok extended beyond iron. Their terracotta figurines demonstrate understanding of material properties, kiln construction, and thermal management. Hollow figures were carefully fired to prevent cracking, while solid heads required precise temperature control to maintain integrity. The complexity of these artistic methods implies apprenticeship systems and knowledge transmission across generations, reflecting a culture that valued skill, teaching, and continuity. Art itself held profound meaning. The terracotta figures, often depicting human faces with triangular eyes, elaborate hairstyles, and scarification marks, suggest complex social identities. Some scholars interpret them as representations of ancestors, serving to honor lineage and maintain connections between the living and the dead. Others suggest they may have functioned as status markers, signifying leadership, wealth, or spiritual authority. The diversity of figures, ranging from humans to animals, indicates an integrated worldview in which humans, nature, and spiritual entities were deeply intertwined. Environmental factors influenced the development and eventual decline of the Nok. The red soils of central Nigeria, rich in iron, were critical for smelting, but sustaining furnaces required large quantities of charcoal. Deforestation to fuel iron production would have gradually altered local ecosystems, affecting agriculture and settlement stability. Coupled with climatic shifts, including periods of drought and soil degradation, these pressures likely contributed to migration, population dispersal, or cultural transformation by around 500 CE. Despite their disappearance from the archaeological record, the influence of the Nok persisted. Later West African civilizations inherited both technological knowledge and artistic inspiration. The intricate bronze work of Ife and Benin, for example, bears stylistic echoes of Nok terracottas, while regional blacksmithing traditions trace lineage to Nok iron production. The Nok thus occupy a critical position in the history of African innovation, bridging the gap between early village societies and the complex kingdoms that would rise centuries later. Excavations in the 20th century revealed additional insights. Bernard Fagg, one of the first professional archaeologists to study the Nok, documented hundreds of artifacts, mapping their distribution across Nigeria's central plateau. Radiocarbon dating confirmed their chronology, while comparative studies established links between Nok techniques and later metallurgical practices in the region. The terracotta heads, often unearthed from erosion-prone slopes and riverbeds, became emblematic of the culture itself, highlighting both its artistic sophistication and the fragility of archaeological preservation. The discovery of the Nok challenged long-held assumptions about African prehistory. For decades, scholars outside the continent underestimated sub-Saharan civilizations, assuming complex metallurgy, art, and societal organization emerged only through contact with Europe or the Middle East. Nok evidence decisively contradicted these views, demonstrating that indigenous African societies had independently developed advanced technology and cultural expression long before colonial contact. Terracotta art provides additional insight into social structure. Many figures depict adult males and females, sometimes holding children or objects, suggesting recognition of family roles and community responsibilities. Animals featured prominently, possibly reflecting religious or ritual symbolism as well as economic importance. Elephants, for instance, may represent strength or spiritual guardianship, while monkeys or reptiles could indicate totemic associations or mythic narratives. These representations indicate a rich cultural imagination that blended everyday life with spiritual interpretation. Settlement layouts suggest planning and foresight. Archaeologists have identified clusters of dwellings, often surrounding communal spaces or hearths. The proximity of iron-smelting furnaces to homes implies integration of labor, family, and community oversight. The repeated placement of furnaces in similar configurations across different sites indicates standardized knowledge and possibly shared governance principles. Communities were neither isolated nor haphazard. They were deliberate, resilient, and interconnected. The disappearance of the Nok remains enigmatic. While environmental degradation and resource exhaustion offer plausible explanations, some evidence points to migration. Subsequent populations in the region adopted and adapted Nok technologies and artistic styles, suggesting continuity rather than complete extinction. Cultural memory may have persisted orally, influencing rituals, crafts, and societal norms in neighboring communities. The Nok thus represent both an end and a beginning, the closure of one chapter and the foundation of another in West African history. Their legacy is tangible not only in artifacts but also in methodology. The smelting techniques perfected by the Nok foreshadowed metallurgical advances that would define the Iron Age across the continent. Their terracotta artistry set aesthetic standards that informed later traditions. By observing their methods, modern archaeologists gain insight into early African engineering, community organization, and spiritual life, revealing a civilization that was both innovative and socially sophisticated. The Nok Culture of Nigeria. The Nok society was as much defined by belief as by iron. While no written records survive, the terracotta figures and ceremonial artifacts hint at a worldview that connected the material and spiritual realms. Human figurines, often depicted with elaborate hairstyles, scarification, or ornamentation, may have represented ancestors, leaders, or deities. Some scholars suggest these figures were placed in shrines, serving as conduits for prayers, protection, or guidance. Animal sculptures, such as elephants, leopards, and snakes, imply symbolic associations with strength, agility, fertility, or the natural world. Through these representations, the Nok encoded cultural values and transmitted them across generations. Ritual practices likely coincided with agricultural cycles and seasonal changes. Harvest festivals, initiation ceremonies, and offerings to spirits would have reinforced social cohesion, ensuring that knowledge, customs, and moral codes were shared communally. The alignment of certain habitation sites near water sources or elevated terrain may have had ritual significance, connecting daily life with the sacred landscape. Archaeological traces of fire pits, hearths, and clay figurines in specific contexts support this interpretation. Iron production itself may have held ritual importance. The act of transforming stone and ore into metal, a process involving extreme heat and controlled combustion, could have been viewed as a mystical act, bridging human labor and natural forces. Blacksmiths, essential to the community, may have occupied a respected social or spiritual position, mediating between the earth's resources and the people's needs. Iron was simultaneously practical, symbolic, and potentially sacred. Trade networks further reinforced the Nok culture's influence. Archaeologists have found evidence of long-distance exchange of goods, including pottery, iron implements, and decorative items. While local markets served everyday needs, specialized trade routes likely extended hundreds of kilometers, connecting Nok communities with distant regions of the savanna and forest. Through trade, technological innovations spread, artistic styles evolved, and the Nok established a legacy that persisted in later West African civilizations. The technical sophistication of Nok ironworking suggests structured apprenticeship and knowledge transmission. Master smiths trained younger generations, teaching methods of ore selection, furnace construction, bellows operation, and tool finishing. Such training ensured consistency and quality, maintaining the culture's technological edge over centuries. The scale and complexity of iron production imply coordination and oversight at the community level, reflecting a society that valued both practical skill and collective achievement. Environmental pressures influenced Nok settlement patterns and technological choices. The need for charcoal to fuel furnaces required careful management of forest resources. Over time, deforestation may have forced communities to relocate or adapt new fuel sources. Soil fertility dictated agricultural practices, while seasonal rainfall shaped planting and harvesting cycles. Climate fluctuations, including periods of drought, would have tested the resilience of these communities, compelling innovation and flexibility. The interplay between environmental conditions and human activity illustrates a sophisticated understanding of ecological management. The Nok culture's decline around 500 CE remains a subject of scholarly debate. Some argue that resource depletion and environmental stress contributed to gradual dispersal. Others suggest social or political changes, including population pressures, conflicts, or integration into emerging regional cultures, led to transformation rather than abrupt disappearance. Evidence indicates that while distinct Nok settlements ceased to exist, their technological and artistic traditions persisted, influencing the development of subsequent West African societies. The terracotta artifacts provide a lens into Nok social hierarchy and identity. Male and female figures, sometimes depicted holding children or ritual objects, reflect family structures and community roles. Hairstyles and jewelry indicate distinctions of status or group affiliation. The recurrence of motifs across multiple sites suggests a shared cultural language and belief system, reinforcing cohesion among dispersed communities. These artistic expressions offer insight into values, social norms, and spiritual conceptions that cannot be discerned from tools and architecture alone. Archaeological findings highlight the interplay between innovation and adaptation. Furnaces, for example, were designed to withstand intense heat while optimizing airflow for efficient smelting. The use of local clay and laterite demonstrates material knowledge and experimentation. Pottery, often decorated with geometric or figurative motifs, indicates aesthetic sensibility and practical skill. The Nok combined function with form, producing tools, art, and ceremonial objects that fulfilled multiple social and economic purposes. The cultural influence of the Nok extended far beyond their immediate settlements. Later West African civilizations, including the Yoruba, Benin, and Hausa, inherited elements of Nok metallurgy, artistic motifs, and possibly social organization. These continuities underscore the Nok as a foundational civilization in the region, providing technological and cultural frameworks that shaped centuries of development. The evidence challenges earlier narratives that suggested Sub-Saharan Africa lacked complex societies prior to European contact. Rediscovery of the Nok culture in the 20th century brought global recognition. Excavations at villages such as Teruga revealed hundreds of artifacts, mapping the civilization's geographic and chronological extent. Radiocarbon dating confirmed the antiquity of sites, placing them between 1000 BCE and 500 CE. The scale and sophistication of the settlements, coupled with the quality of terracotta art, repositioned Nok within the broader context of world prehistory, demonstrating that advanced metallurgy and artistic expression were indigenous to West Africa. Through meticulous study, archaeologists have reconstructed aspects of daily life. Villagers likely organized labor collectively, with families specializing in farming, animal husbandry, or metallurgy. Ceremonial practices were intertwined with agricultural and social cycles. Artistic production served functional, symbolic, and ritual purposes, reinforcing shared beliefs. Trade and communication connected communities, allowing ideas, techniques, and resources to circulate across wide regions. The Nok exemplify a society where technological innovation, cultural expression, and environmental adaptation converged seamlessly. Despite the absence of written records, the material culture of the Nok speaks with clarity. Terracotta heads and figurines, iron tools, pottery, and habitation structures provide a multidimensional understanding of their society. Each artifact represents not only skill and creativity, but also values, social organization, and worldview. Through these remnants, the Nok communicate across millennia, offering insight into one of Africa's earliest complex civilizations.